Good afternoon, everybody. It's awesome. I love it. You guys are awake and alive, at least for a little bit longer. So I was joking with Eric, who's on my board at the X Prize, and I said, dude, you know, you're raising $4.2 billion for UCLA. I mean, I got to raise my my targets for you. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about exponential technologies. And I think a lot about how it's going to disrupt healthcare and how it's going to change our lives in every aspect of how we live them and how we practice and how we do anything in society. So I want to give you some context for sort of the rate of change we're living in. Hopefully you know it. Hopefully you're part of creating it. Hopefully this is not something that is new to you. Then I want to get down to just painting the picture in the types of disruptions and changes that are coming, mostly to get you excited and get you thinking. So I run a number of different companies. Here in Los Angeles, I'm the chairman and CEO of the X Prize Foundation. We put up these large $10 million to $30+ million prizes to incentivize people to drive breakthroughs. Up in Silicon Valley, I'm executive chairman of a university called Singularity University that really focuses on the most rapidly growing technologies. And unlike the typical program where you go and you get your PhD in one particular area, right? You're the world's expert on an ion channel and a particular neuron and a particular insect, but you're the world's expert in that unique piece, which is a lot of the way that we drive progress in our higher institutions of learning. When Ray Kurzweil, who's one of the most brilliant thinkers in artificial intelligence, and I joined forces to create SU, wanted to create a new kind of institution, one in which it wasn't about the depth, it really was about the breadth, and in particular, in those technologies doubling in power year on year. So what are they? It's infinite computing, cloud computing if you would, networks and sensors, artificial intelligence, robotics, synthetic biology, 3D printing / digital manufacturing, and all of these that are empowering individuals, not companies, not governments, not universities, empowering individuals today to do what only governments and large corporations could do 20 years ago. And it's hard for us to realize the power that we now have because we're blind to it, we're numb to it, right? When you took your iPhone 5, if probably the majority of you, who here owns iPhone 6? Raise your hand. Okay, so a good 40%. You took your own iPhone 5 and you threw it in the drawer. You forget that you're throwing away the computing power of the entire US military and government throughout the 60s and 70s, right? And that the launch weekend for iPhone 6, in the weekend alone, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, where Apple sold iPhone 6s, it sold more transistors in that one product, in that one weekend, than existed on planet Earth in 1995. Right, so we lose perspective on how massive our power is, and how all of these technologies, 3D printing is going to disrupt a $10 trillion manufacturing industry. It's going to change how we manufacture, where we manufacture. AI and robotics are going to change medicine forever. And I guess what I want to do here is perhaps paint a little bit of a picture of where it's going. So I run X Prize and SU. I run a company called Human Longevity, Inc., or I'm the co-founder and vice chairman, I should say. Craig Venter is my partner and is the CEO. He runs the organization. And then another company called Planetary Resources, which is in the business of building deep space spacecraft to prospect near-Earth asteroids for precious materials. But I'll leave that one for a different Anderson class. So where are we going? First of all, I heard in the beginning the discussion of data. We're entering a world right now where I believe over the next decade we're going to enter a period where we're going to be able to know anything we want, anytime we want, anywhere we want. We're heading towards a world of perfect knowledge. Right? We forget that when the first digital camera was created back in 1976 by Kodak, that digital camera that generated 0.01 megapixel images, Kodak ignored, had the patents, didn't use them, forgot about the fact that they had it, and ultimately that technology put them out of business. right, in 2012. And you know, the 10 megapixel camera that you have in your phone today, 10 years from now will be 1,000 times better. You know, 20 years from now will be 1,000,000 times better. 30 years from now will be 1,000,000,000 times better. And what does that look like when everything everywhere is being imaged? Google's autonomous cars, it's driving down the road. That LiDAR on the roof, that laser imaging radar, is generating 750 megabytes of data per second from one car. It's seeing everything within a 100-meter radius as it's driving down the road. You know, drones, as we begin to explode, we'll have a tremendous explosion of drones in as frequent as cell phones are today inside the next 10 years. All these things are generating data. We are living in a world my friends at Cisco call the Internet of Everything, the Internet of Things, right? We have 12 billion connected devices today. We'll be at somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 100 billion connected devices by 2020. And those connected devices have on the order of a dozen sensors like your cell phone does. And so we'll be living in a world of 1 trillion sensors, where if you want to know something, you can. And I don't know how you feel. How many folks here have any biomedical monitoring or biometric monitoring right now? Can you raise your hand? So right, I've got my heart rate here and my steps. So a small handful. You know, for the most of the world, we don't right now, but that's also going to change this decade very predominantly. I like to say that our refrigerators are better wired and monitored than we are. Right? But I drive a Tesla at home, I fly an SR-22 airplane, and both of them have hundreds of processors and sensors. And we're going to start to become monitored and sensed in a way that is going to transform medicine. But even more so than that, I think we're going to end up in a world very soon where artificial intelligence, ultimately, and robotics are going to become our first-tier healthcare provider. And so how does that change medicine? And so let me go into a little bit of detail there. So last year was the largest year ever for AI investments, on the order of 30 times more than in previous years. And I think it's just the beginning now, right? Facebook, Google, Microsoft, whole slew of companies like startups like Vicarious are entering the AI world. How many have heard of Watson or seen Watson in Jeopardy? Could I just get a show of hands? So you guys know that in general, right? So 2 years ago, IBM built a supercomputer named after James Watson, the founder of IBM. And they wanted to show how epic the supercomputer was in doing artificial intelligence. And they challenged the all two-time Jeopardy champions. The guy had won the most money, the guy had won the most games. And Watson decimated them in Jeopardy. But that was 2 years ago. So where has it gone since? Well, first of all, they've taken this supercomputer that, artificial intelligence is the ability of a computer to understand what you're asking and answer, understand your cynicism, your humor, your confusion, and search all of its memory banks. And as a human, we have a limited number of, if you would, memory modules in our brain, a limited amount of memory that we have, but these computers don't. So Watson had downloaded Wikipedia. It could read 1 million books per second. It was able to search a vast amount of knowledge and pick out relevant points from here and there, and then be able to come up with effectively a differential diagnosis, the top 3 answers. It would weigh them and give you the answer it thought was right. And it turned out through Jeopardy to be right. So where is Watson gone now? They've taken Watson and they've put it on the cloud, and they've put an open API, a user interface that allows entrepreneurs to create application layers on top of Watson. And the first place, of course, Watson is going is to medical school. So what they're doing is they're downloading all the medical journals, all the medical textbooks, all the relevant research, all the data that they can, that no human could possibly fathom, right? When you go to your doctor, whether you're a physician or not, and you get a checkup, the amount of data you're generating from your genome scan, your MRI, your blood workup, your microbiome workup, all of that cannot possibly be, understood by any physician or any group of physicians. But Watson can. Watson can hold all of this data relevant in context, in its memory, and then ask questions. And ask questions based upon the data that is in the latest journal right here, right now. And so we're going to start to see artificial intelligence become, if you would, the interface between the physician and the patient. But it's also going to become the interface for the patient themselves. When Watson is on the cloud, and I can call up Watson on my cell phone and saying I'm not feeling well, and have a conversation and have it understand what I'm asking and reference my medical files or whatever, and then give me an answer, how is that going to change the practice of medicine? Now, in the early days, it's going to be sort of the physician-guided questioning, but in the final result, if an AI can be your diagnostician far better than any human, when will the court case occur when the court says to the doctor, did you consult the AI or not? And if you didn't, why didn't you? Because it would have diagnosed this case, and then all of a sudden there's a bit flip that occurs. So there's going to be, AI is going to be driving very hard into medicine very quickly. And with $6 to $7 trillion being spent per year in care over the age of 60, it's a huge area. And it's something that the more data and the more knowledge and the more cases that are driven into the AI, the better its predictive capabilities. It's sort of a network effect that will occur. So we can talk about AI in the Q&A. The flip side of that is going to be robotics. And I think robotics is going to enter medicine very heavily very soon. It's going to enter into hospitals we already see Da Vinci in hospitals. I think UCLA has a number of those robots here where you can beam in, if you would, an expert surgeon who happens to be in Beijing right now into the operating suite to handle a fine procedure. But as robots become more and more capable, now driven by AI, when is it going to happen when you walk into the emergency room or into the to the pre-op interview and you see a physician coming at you and you say, oh, no, I do not want that human touching me. I want the robot that's done it perfectly 5,000 times. Because the first thing I learn in medicine when I'm going through is if you're going to have a procedure, you want to find the physician who's done it the most times. Right, who's seen the most variations, who's seen the most complications, who's seen all of this, and it's that experience base. So what happens when a robot is actually done it, shares its knowledge among all the AIs and robots and does it perfectly, and it doesn't jitter, doesn't worry about what had a breakup with your girlfriend or boyfriend the night or morning before, whether you drank too much coffee or any of that. So robotics is going to be coming in, and the fidelity at which a robot can in fact execute microsurgery is going to be extraordinary. And when you think of it, the cost of the surgery then is really the cost of electricity and the amortized cost of the equipment. And so all of a sudden we see diagnostics with AIs and procedures with robotics start to approach zero marginal cost. So now it starts to become very interesting. I'll layer on top of that and I hope I don't depress you too much. I'm trying to actually show you a little view of how I see the future coming, because it's going to be changing business models. It's going to be changing practice. And I'll tell you about one other thing and then give you the context from my own perspective. The other thing is, about 3 years ago, I was having lunch with Paul Jacobs. Paul is the chairman of Qualcomm. And I was explaining to him, I said, Paul, at the X Prize, we launched about 2 or 3 major X Prizes every year, and we're looking for areas that should be transformed that aren't yet. And I said to Paul, we really should have the Star Trek tricorder by now. Where the hell is it? And he said, I agree. And I said, how about doing an X Prize there? We shook hands on it. And so 6 months later, we were on the stage of the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas announcing a $10 million X Prize for the Qualcomm tricorder. And this is a device that you can speak to. It's got AI on the cloud. It understands what you're saying, what you're asking. It's not for the doctor or for the nurse. It's for the mom or dad at 2 o'clock in the morning when your kid is sick. And it understands what you're able to say. You can cough on it. You can do the RNA or DNA analysis of the pathogens in your sputum. You can do a micro blood prick in your blood chemistries. And in success, this device should be able, in its version 0, right, the first version of the competition we're doing, diagnose 15 disease states better than a human can. That's the first target. We had 350 teams enter the competition. We're down to the top 10 finalists. We'll have a winner by the end of this year. So we hope that we'll have this tricorder, I call it sort of version 0.9. And the beautiful thing about that tricorder is it should follow the same demonetization curves as cell phones do, so that the tricorder becomes the physician in much of the world. So, relatively speaking, we're short 100,000 doctors in the US by 2020, at least in our current medical structure. But that's great compared to the rest of the world, right? Africa's got 25% of the disease burden and 1.3% of the healthcare workers. You're never going to train enough doctors or build enough hospitals to meet the developing world need. The only way you can scale to that level is using technology. And so we'll see the tricorder, as we hope, become something that is in every village and becomes the de facto accurate diagnostician in every village. So what does it mean for the practice of medicine when all of a sudden we're demonetizing it, right? The incremental cost of diagnosis and repair starts heading towards 0. And it's democratized, available to everybody. What's it mean for doctors or for medical practices? And it may actually mean a revitalization of what a doctor used to be. So I'm a physician by training, and as Eric said, please, I'm the last person you want to come to. I offer, if you need your appendix out, I'll take out the second one for free, but, my dad, who is an 87-year-old right now with advanced Alzheimer's, was also a physician, and I hadn't been in the medical arena actually in a hospital setting until he broke his pelvis. And I went down to Boca Raton, Florida, where he was stationed, and I find there all of a sudden a situation that I was aghast at, right? It was, the neurologist talking to him about Alzheimer's, his cardiologist only focusing on his heart, his orthopedist only on his pelvis. There was no one looking at him. And everyone's too busy running around to actually sit down and talk to anybody. And we're in this treadmill in the medical arena where there's no one actually taking care of the actual full patient, let alone, a condition. So I hope that technology will in fact allow physicians and nurses and healthcare workers to actually care about the person, while technology actually takes care of the rest of the details. So I think we'll have a transformation of what medicine is going forward. Let me just hit on a few other big things and then really open up the conversation for dialogue. So the other company that I mentioned, Human Longevity, we have built the world's largest genome. So a year ago, we announced the company. It had been in the works for another year before that. It was co-founded by myself, Craig Venter, who sequenced the first human genome in 2001. It cost him $100 million in 9 months to sequence one genome, his own genome. And that genome was interesting but useless. Not because it was his, but because in a vacuum, one genome becomes, again, there's nothing to compare it to. There's nothing to understand. There's no contextualization of a single genome. And then the other co-founder is a guy named Bob Hariri, MD, PhD, Navy fighter pilot, brilliant guy who built one of the largest stem cell practices in the world, runs Cell Gene Therapeutics, and is really one of the foremost thinkers and business builders in stem cells. And so we built a company whose mission it is, our stated mission is to add 30 to 40 healthy years on everyone's life. Our goal is make 100 years old and use 60. And we're doing that in a couple of ways. We've built the largest genome sequencing facility. We're up at a multi-100,000 person rate. Our goal is 5 million genomes by 2020. But it's not just the genomes. It's the full genomes, 3.2 billion letters from your mother, 3.2 billion from your father, the haplotype phasing at 30x coverage, the highest level fidelity genomes that exist. But besides that, it's all the phenotypic data for a patient. It's your full microbiome, right? You're a collection of 10 trillion human cells and 100 trillion bacterial cells. And those bacterial cells drive 10% of the chemicals in your bloodstream. It may cause a much larger percentage of diseases than we currently think right now. So sequencing your microbiome, your high-resolution MRI, your metabolome, the 2400 chemicals in your bloodstream, and creating one of the most massive data sets ever. And so we stole out of Google a guy named Franz Ock. Franz started and ran Google Translate for 10 years, translating between 80 different language pairs for pretty perfect translation. And so he's now built our machine learning team at HLI, and he's translating between phenotype, genome, microbiome, all of these things to pull out unseen coincidences and causalities. And our goal is really to attack cancer, neurodegenerative, and heart disease first, the top 3 killers. But then how do we add really aging with excellent mobility, looking good, feeling good, thinking well, moving well, all the things that make us want to live to be plus 100. That's our goal. So how does that change the world when the patient population is living a healthy life and a productive life in business, till over 100? Well, I think we're going to change a number of things, right? We'll probably change retirement age. We may change institution of marriage. We may change a few different things. Until death do us part takes different meanings at that point. But so I think this is where we're going. What we're finding, though, is very interesting, right? That from your genome at that high resolution, there's no way of de-identifying it. Because from your genome, we can predict exactly what you look like. We have a forensic genomicist on board who can tell you, paint a picture of your face and what you sound like from your vocal cords. We're finding that much, much more is nature versus nurture. And I'm a father of 3.5-year-old twin boys, and their personalities were, I don't know if recent parents here can remember it, I can see their personalities in week 1 that's still present in in 3.5 years later. So I think we're going to start to find out that your brain structure, whether you're a compulsive gambler, whether you're depressed, what diseases you're likely to get, can all be predicted genetically. So what happens when that occurs? We're going to be able to tell exactly who you're related to everywhere in the world. We can chart your ancestors' movements by which ports they went to and had illicit affairs on travels through the world. I mean, we're going to be finding so much extraordinary information. But what else? Well, it's going to change life insurance and health insurance. How many folks here are interested in life insurance and health insurance? Or it's an area of interest? I mean, from a business perspective, raise your hand. So for example, the life insurance companies, all of a sudden, when your payout is pushed 20 or 30 years, you mint money, right? Because you're collecting payments, and you're for much longer, and you're pushing your payments out much more. But on the health and life insurance, on the flip side, the way the insurance business works is, we know that when we take this population of individuals, 100,000 individuals, and the top 5% is going to make us all our money, because they're never going to be sick, they're never going to go to the hospital. The bottom 20% we're going to be paying out constantly, in the middle maybe a break even, and that's the way it works. But what happens in the future where I can go online and I can put out there and say, listen, here's my genome, I'm going to post it. Here's my workout record, I'm going to post it. Here's my eating record. I'm very low risk genetically, I work out every day, I eat healthy. Anyone else in this category, let's self-insure. Let's take ourselves out of the insurance market. So what happens when the top 5%, the money makers, pull themselves out, self-insure? Insurance market collapses. Will it happen? I think absolutely. Will it be regulated against? Maybe in the death knells of the insurance market. What happens when I can go to down here and say, now, I can't determine your insurance rate based upon your genomic scan. The Gini laws prevent that. But what happens when I can say, this group of 1,000 houses has a 0.05% increased probability of Alzheimer's, so I'm not going to insure them, I'm only going to insure this group over here. And how do I know that? All I have to do is sample the sewer pipe. And look at the DNA sloughed off of the sewers from all those houses and do a statistical average and say, this group over here has a much higher probability of this disease or that disease, statistically speaking. So, I mean, we're going to start to have some very interesting changes that occur. Autonomous cars are going to change a lot, right? The majority of all injuries are occurred from, in age 5 to 12 are from car accidents. And so what happens when cars no longer crash? My 3.5-year-olds aren't ever going to drive. They're going to, by the time they're 12, they'll be hopping in the car and saying, take me here, take me there. Every major car company is predicted that they will have autonomous cars. And that changes everything. You don't own a car anymore, you own access to a car. You don't have parking garages or driveways because you don't have to put your car any place. The car just goes off into something else useful. Cars don't have to weigh 5,000 pounds to protect you against a 6,000-pound SUV because they don't crash. You don't need car insurance anymore because they don't crash. I mean, all these things begin to change. All these, and we're going to start to see these domino effects on these technologies, and they occur very, very quickly. So I'll just mention a couple of things in passing. Can I mention what we're working on, Eric? Or is that? Yeah. So one of the things that the X Prize Foundation is working on with UCLA is an organ preservation and an organogenesis X Prize. So today, you know, how many people die because they don't have access to transplantable organs? And the concept is, I got to wait for someone to die before I get an organ? How barbaric is that? So what happens in the future when we're able to go from a skin cell to a pluripotent stem cell to regrowing myself a heart, liver, lung, or kidney and have a sort of set of spare organs on storage? Now, I don't think it's a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And can we accelerate those things? So I view us living in a world where, unless it's against the laws of physics, we're going to be seeing this happening. And the reason it's happening, I like to say that the only constant is change, and the rate of change is increasing. And the reason it's increasing is a number of reasons. I'll just paint this and then close for Q&A. I'm going to give you a sense of this march of technology that's coming. So first of all, you've all heard of Moore's Law, right? The notion, Gordon Moore predicted in 1965 that the average computer is doubling in processing power every 18 to 24 months, and it's been true for 50 years. Likely to continue every time we reach a barrier with, you know, with vacuum tubes and relays and transistors, integrated circuits. We use that technology to invent the next technology and the next technology, and it's been going on and likely to continue. And those computers then drive on top of them 3D printing and synthetic biology and networks and sensors and all these other technologies which we as individuals now can start companies and produce things with. Innovation, if you'd ask me to define innovation, innovation is the process by which, you know, I have an idea, I toss it to you, you build on it, you toss it back, and we share ideas, we build up. That's why most innovation occurs not with a person just thinking on their own, but in conversation. And as people moved out of the rural areas into the cities, into the coffee shops and so forth, innovation started to skyrocket as densities of individuals increased. And now the World Wide Web and its derivatives thereof are the coffee shops where these things are occurring. But something magical is happening this decade that's going to explode everything. And that magical thing is the number of people connected. So in 2010, there was 1.8 billion people connected online. Today, it's about 2.8. By 2010, the low-end projection was 5 billion people. Another, you know, from 2010 to 2020, 3 billion new minds coming online. Announcements recently with Paul Jacobs and Richard Branson and Greg Weiler in one camp, and Elon Musk and Larry Page in another camp, and Facebook in another camp, is a goal to give every single human on the planet a megabit connection in the next 5 years. What happens when 7 billion people have a megabit connection? And it's not just that they're coming online with a great connection compared to 9600 baud when you and I came on with AOL, whatever it was back then. It's that they're coming online with a megabit connection with access to the world's information on Google, right? I like to say that, you know, the poorest teenager in Mumbai on a smartphone has access to more knowledge than President Clinton had when he was president. And today has access to as much information as Larry Page or Eric Schmidt at Google have. Google democratized, leveled the playing field. But now, 5 years from now, that person's coming on with access to cloud printing, when 3D printing on the cloud, Amazon Web Services. You want to spin up, 10,000 cores, you can. You used to have to be the chief of the Joint Chiefs of, the DoD to do that before, or the chairman of MIT or Stanford or UCLA, whatever it might have been, to have that much computing power. Now anybody can. So all of a sudden, 5 billion new minds with access to extraordinary capabilities are coming online in 5 years. We haven't seen a fraction of 1% of the rate of change we're going to see this decade. Not even close. So hopefully that's evocative. And I'd love to have some Q&A. So thank you.
Yeah, Peter, thanks for coming. Boy, I am both amazed and completely freaked out by your talk. So I wanted to hear about what you guys are doing at Singularity University. Clearly, what's coming is frightening.
Or exciting.
Perhaps. But I want to know what you guys are doing at Singularity University so that the technology that is currently being developed doesn't overtake us. What are you guys doing to sort of harness things? And
we're getting on its good side. So there is a constant conversation about the ethics and morals of the technology. And it's really hard for us as humans to have context. And perhaps this is false belief, but every generation feels like the technologies coming online are destructive to its culture and threatening to its society, whether it was the creation of writing, which got rid of our needs to memorize, or the printing press, which was heralded as an evil thing, or back in 1964, a letter went to the President of the United States, signed by a set of Nobel laureates, who warned the President about the dangers of automation, of wiping out the job market in the United States. And this were the earlier computers. And the question is, of course, is it different this time? So, you've all heard my friend Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk talking about the concerns and the dangers of AI. And the people who are actually the experts in that field, Ray Kurzweil, Peter Nordvig, many others, don't have those same concerns. Will we get there? Will we reach a point in which there should be and are concerns, and how do we protect against that? It's a conversation that's starting right now and needs to start. But the notion that the government can regulate against any of this is a myth, right? You don't regulate against technology because we live in a world of porous borders. If you say it's illegal here, just go someplace else, along with the capital and the people. So it's actually something that needs to be guided, right? The Asilomar standards, when genetic engineering was first created, it was the early people with recombinant DNA who got together and said, let's set our own standards. Let's, as a group, really figure out how to do this safely. That's the kind of thinking that needs to get done, and it's the kind of thinking that we try and drive and talk about today. This stuff is dangerous. I also believe, and I talk about this, I mentioned before, we're heading towards a world where you can know anything you want, anytime you want, anywhere you want, perfect knowledge. And for me, that lets me sleep at night to a large degree, because it's really hard to do things in secret these days. Right? Is privacy dead? I think so. I think it's long dead. We can keep the illusion if we want to. But most evil doing in the world occurs in places in the dark where people aren't watching what's going on. But today there's private constellations that you can buy footage from of high definition live video. You have to be the CIA and the FBI to have this before. Today, any of us can. So we're changing. We have to change our morals and our ethics around these things as well. Not 50 years or 100 years. During our lives, next 20, 30 years, all this stuff is changing really fast. And for me, if I can just provide sort of like a wake-up call, and you can walk away and go back to the world as usual and say that's bullshit or whatever the case may be, or not. Check for it yourself. But there is massive change coming. I, for one, view this as uplifting humanity, right? giving every man, woman, and child on this planet the basic needs of food, water, shelter, healthcare, learning, demonetizing, democratizing, dematerializing these basic human functions and needs. Please.
So a little bit keeping with the privacy and the sort of exciting to creepy back to exciting element here. It's not so, I mean, we know there's all sorts of data breaches all the time. People aren't encrypting very important information, but I want to switch it a little bit to your perception or your opinion about the idea like Dick Cheney's pacemaker being able to be shut off or intercepted. The more transistors we add to cars that can communicate, somebody could hack in and shut down the car system, or just the element that we know wherever there's good, exciting innovation, there's also people who want to mess with it. And what you're doing, or what your opinion is about the ability for people to take this democratized information and not just data breach it, but actually run things, manipulate it.
So I want to try a bit flip in your mind and that of the group here. It's really easy for us to point out the potential dangers. That's what our evolutionary brain does. We do really well. We find the danger way before it happens, but we ignore the good. So we say, oh, Dick Cheney's pacemaker, and forget the millions of people with pacemakers that are benefiting from it. And you know, the flip side is, and this, I have this battle with the FDA all the time, right? The FDA's mindset is, oh, we can't allow that drug or that technology because of it might be dangerous. And so all you're measuring in the circumstance is the potential deaths that could be caused if it was made legal. You don't measure all the deaths that do occur because it isn't tried. And we have this perverse situation that drives me up the, I would be using a 4-letter expletive starting with F if I could right now, wall. And it really irks me that this risk aversion we take costs lives. And I can't even take the risks if I want as an individual. And I hate this fact, how risk adverse we've become. And the challenge is that when the government starts telling me I can't try things because I want to take the risk with my life to try these things. So this negative mindset that we have about, oh, what if this happens, what if this happens? Yes, all this could happen. But the fact of the matter is, we forget that technology is the one force that has transformed this world, right? 150 years ago, the average lifespan was like 30, right? 30. Think about, try that on for those of you above 30 or just below 30. You know, the human lifespan has more than doubled. The per capita income for every nation over the last 100 years has more than tripled. The cost of food has dropped 13-fold. Energy has dropped 20-fold. Transportation has dropped 100-fold. We are living during the most peaceful time ever in human history, right? You wouldn't know that watching the Crisis News Network, whose job it is to take every murder, every warfare, and bring it to your eyes on television over and over and over again. Why? Because that's how they make money. Do not be fooled by this. Their job is to deliver your eyeballs, your prefrontal cortex to their advertisers. And they do that because you as a human, me as a human, we pay 10 times more attention to negative news than positive news. It's evolutionary. That's what kept us alive in the days where a rustle in the leaves could be a tiger and not the wind. And all that negative news really depresses us. And you let them. I don't watch the news. I step over the newspaper. I get my news only from the sources I need that are relevant to me. Your mindset matters. And if you're looking at the downside of all the things all the time, it's going to depress living daylights out of you. And yes, there are challenges. Yes, there will be autonomous cars that do crash, but I guarantee you, far less than the 50,000 lives we lose on the roads today and the millions around the world. Far, far less. So would I rather have autonomous cars around the world where we have a few dozen high-profile accidents where some hacker took it over compared to the 1 million, 500,000, 1 million lives we lose around the world? Absolutely. And would I, on all the other negative things we have? Because those things don't happen in secret. They're found immediately. They're plugged, and they go on. And do we have cybersecurity issues? Absolutely. Will there be terrorist activities? Absolutely. Is the world getting better at an extraordinary, unprecedented rate? Absolutely. Why? Not because we've gotten smarter and we have better politicians. It's the impact of technology on our world. Technology is the force that takes what was scarce and makes it available and abundant for everybody.
Okay. Thank you for your forward-looking talk. It was really a great learning experience. Appreciate that. I was at my physician's a few days ago, and what she was telling me is, with a little bit of technology with electronic medical records, what's happening for her is her time spent for patient care versus support tasks has changed from 80-20 to now 60-40. With robotics,
Is that a good direction or a bad direction?
From her perspective, in the bad direction.
So was she spending more time with the patients or less?
Less.
Okay.
So she was doing 80 patients, 20 support, and now she's doing 60.
Because she's data entry all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so that's an interim situation, right?
So,
because,
to add to that part of it, the next part of it is with robotics and AI coming up. How do you see the role of doctors changing? For example, your twins, if they're planning to become doctors, what are the kinds of things that they should be preparing for?
So I began with, thank you for the question. I began with the sort of the conversation about my father in this Boca Raton hospital, and my being just aghast by the lack of treatment, because the doctor would come in, take a quick look, and leave, right? And look at his heart status or his neurological status, whatever the case might be, and no one was spending time with the family. I literally went to the web, looked at the board of directors, found someone I knew, got to the chairman, and found the president of the hospital and said, I need to speak to you right now. And that's the way I finally got some treatment. But that's a ridiculous thing for me to have to do. And I think in the future, what I'm hoping is that AIs will do all the paperwork, robotics will move the patients to do the other things, and give a physician a chance to actually be a human with a human. And it's much more going back to house calls and building a relationship. And I think there's a chance for there to be a actual caring where it's 100% patient and 0% bullshit. You have a question? Your mic is open.
The AI stuff you said is like more than Hollywood, I believe. But is that like, are we kind of close that can we use AI to understand aging?
AI to understand aging?
Yeah. And will that be possible, like whatever device you guys are trying to make? I mean, a lighter note, like that can tell a person, oh, this cosmetic I want to use or don't want to use, or I want to eat this stuff or not eat this stuff. So how do you, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I think artificial intelligence is a piece of what I call a machine learning puzzle. So this decade, the companies that survive, the industries that survive will be data-driven companies and industries. We are now we create more data than ever before, and your ability to actually understand the data and mine the data. If I was starting a company today, it'd be a company that, and that's what HLI is, it's a data company. It's not a genomics company, not a healthcare company, it's a data company. We are in the collection, in the business of collecting as much massive amount of data as we can, and using machine learning to analyze that data and come out with conclusions. A friend, Vinod Khosla, one of the venture capitalists in the Silicon Valley, I think famously said, and I agree with him, that there will be more breakthroughs in healthcare and biology this decade from data than any other science. Right? Data is going to give us massive amounts of understanding and breakthroughs. And when I think about the ability now to rewrite genomes and to actually be able to say, we're going to actually extract your stem cells, rewrite their genomes, and put them back into you and repair whatever you have. I mean, we're entering a period of extraordinary call it magic, whatever you want. But I think this is where we're heading.
Thanks for your talk, Peter. I've read your book, Abundance, and totally agree with your ideas about how technology is really improving our lives. I'm probably less of a cynic than some people in the room. In thinking about AI, AI is really good at tasks that involve our left hemispheres, like language, discrete data. And as it gets better and AI is able to replicate the right hemisphere tasks, how will that affect healthcare and medicine in the next, let's say, 10 to 20 years?
I'm not sure I have I mean, so one of the questions is, can a robot be a great companion? And a good friend of mine, Dan Barry, who has headed robotics at Singularity University, believes the answer is yes, where the robot effectively, knows all your perfect desires and preferences, laughs at your jokes over and over and over again, and I think we're going to start to see robotics enter that space. I think we're going to start to understand what is truly human and what is not by what AI and robots can or cannot do. And one of the questions I ask is so Watson, for example, is going into cooking and sommelier, and because all of these are data areas and it can match wines and foods and come up with new recipes never before. But will it tell jokes? Will it be humorous? Will it be loving? Will it be caring? And if it is, will you ever believe it? These are things we're going to face, not during your children's lifetime, during our lifetime. So I see the hook, and I'll say thank you very much.